I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce Manish Sabharwal, who I will be inviting to the stage for the keynote address.
So I'm delighted to be here for many reasons, but there are three big ones. The first one is I work for a people supply chain company. We've hired somebody every 5 minutes for the last 20 years, but we've only hired 5% of the kids who came to us for a job. So I'm sort of at the exit gate of the education system, but I'm also at the agony and ecstasy of our labor markets. The ecstasy was obvious. Corporate India has been lowering hiring standards because kids aren't learning what they should have learned in school, not what they should have learned in college. We can teach that, what they should have learned in school. And so I had a telecom client shouting at me recently saying, I have 200 sales positions, why aren't you filling them up? I said, I'm doing it for all your competitors, your hiring standards are too high. So he called me back in 10 minutes and said, okay, I need a pair of hands, I don't care if a brain comes attached. We filled those up in 5 minutes because we continuously, I know economists might be worried about the productivity impact of low hiring standards, but we are in an emergency. We have a cyanide Sardar Bombay office, trespassers will be recruited, and we mean it. So that's the ecstasy. The agony is, we had a job fair in Jaipur, 80,000 kids showed up, I met 800 of them personally. I can guarantee if they were born in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, they would have had a job. But they were born in Dausa, Barmer, Jhunjhunu, or Ajmer. So the two most important decisions a child in India makes are to choose your parents wisely and your PIN code wisely. All of you are laughing because you did that. I obviously did that, that's why you're sitting here. So clearly, from a people supply chain perspective, this is the first ASER report that makes me happy, not sad. Usually my familiar emotion after reading an ASER report over the years has been sadness, but I think today's one is an important reason to sort of be happy. But I think that is related to the topic of the report, right? One of my favorite quotes comes from Eliud Kipchoge. He's a Kenyan marathoner. He's the only human being to have run a marathon in less than 2 hours. He says, you run the first half of the marathon on your legs and the second half on your mind. I think in many parts of India, or Indian thinking, should have moved beyond basics a long time ago. It's not about throwing land, labor, and capital at the problem. India has enough land. You could give every household half an acre and they could fit into Haryana and Rajasthan. We have enough labor, 40% of our labor force is Vela. We have enough capital when we deserve it. 50% of India's foreign direct investment since 1947 has come in the last 6 years. So when we make ourselves worthy, whether it's through skills or infrastructure or other things, land, labor, capital are never the binding constraint. So what is the binding constraint? And that's sort of beyond basics is a wonderful way to describe the problem, which is how does land, labor, capital combine? And that's a complex, Nobel Prizes have been given for that, and I'll come back to that. But let's step back, because for me the shift of beyond basics is fundamental to Indian society, it's fundamental to Indian economy. And we don't live in an economy, we live in a society, but it's hard to unpack those two, and sometimes people get a little moralistic about, this is good for society and this is not for the economy. But, India undertook 2 reckless experiments in 1947. One was political and one was economic. The political experiment worked out spectacularly, right? No country before India had given the right to vote to everybody at birth. Some women in Switzerland got to vote in 1972. So we have created the world's largest democracy on the infertile soil of the world's most hierarchical society, and that reckless experiment worked out spectacularly. But we also did an economic experiment. It was really captured in the 1955 Avadi resolution, or really codified in the second 5-year plan. And I think that's the reason why we are 5th in total GDP in the world, but we are 138th in per capita GDP. And those are two, we're 5th in total GDP because we have a large population, but we're 138th in the world in per capita GDP, which is really what matters for people's lives, because of the economic experiment, which really handicapped. Today our labor is handicapped without capital, and our capital is handicapped without labor. It wasn't God's will that it should take 72 years for 1.3 billion Indians to cross the GDP of 66 million Britishers. India's GDP only crossed Britain in 3 years ago. And this education question often is thought to be linked to the politics question, but from my vantage point, it obviously is in the early stages linked. But when you move the education beyond basics, is linked to the economics question. And the economics question and political question obviously are very closely connected in so many ways. India at 75 is the right time to be thinking about India at 100. And, let's get our fundas clear about what is power or what is, one of my favorite poets is Ramdhari Singh Dinkar. He often, he says, Shama shobhati us bhujang ko jiske paas garal ho. Only the strong can be kind, benevolent, and generous. And what is garal, or what is power in the 21st century? Is it really the hard power of 10 mountain brigades, 5 more Rafale squadrons, or sort of 2 more aircraft carriers? Of course it is. But is it the soft power of movies, languages, research citations, think tanks, and universities? Of course it is. But I think all these are downstream from human capital. Prepare, repair, and upgrade are distinct projects in human capital. And we often sort of tangle repair, prepare, and upgrade. But that's really the most important question to answer when you think about why countries are poor. I landed in the US in August 1994. By September, I was asking myself, these Americans are smarter than us. Why are they richer than us? I mean, clearly, I can kick their butt individually. But why does Joe Sixpack, who drinks beer and watches college football, make $50,000 a year? And why does Ram Barose, who works 24 hours a day, make 50,000 rupees a year? And it's really because productivity is above the level of the individual for a large part. Obviously, productivity is linked to individual performance. But poverty is really about human capital embedded in so many ways. It's embedded at 5 levels that I will come back to. But fundamentally, my belief is there is no such thing as poor people. They are people in poor places. And I'll come back to the 5 poor places. Only 2 are geographic, 3 are conceptual poor places. But this has been recognized for a long time ago if you be honest about what India's problem is. India's problem is not jobs, it is wages. And this distinction is important because if you think India's problem is jobs, you'll throw money from helicopters, you'll mandate a 3-day work week, you'll take away people's shovels and give them spoons to dig with because productivity doesn't matter. But if you think about the 5 geographies of work, right? If a kid moves from Balasore to Patna, you get 2 times more salary. If you move from Patna to Bangalore, you get 5 times more salary. And obviously, if you move from Bangalore to Switzerland, you get 20 times more salary. So is the pathology really at the same individual, the same electrician, or the same barber, or the same salesperson is getting 20 times more salary? So there's no such thing as poor people. They are people in poor places. But these places are physical, 2 of them, obviously states. I live in Karnataka, my parents live in UP. We do the same GDP, both states, but Karnataka has 1/4 the number of people. So obviously people in Karnataka are 4 times more productive at some aggregate level. If you think about cities, I live in Bangalore. Bangalore's GDP is now $12,500, which means that if everybody in India lived in Bangalore, our GDP would be more than China, even though China's per capita GDP is 5 times more than us. So you have to be careful when you sort of think about pathologies. There's obviously state, there's obviously cities, there's obviously sectors. IT is only 0.8% of India's labor force. We celebrate software a lot, but it's a rounding error in our labor force. But farms are 42% of our labor force and only produce 14% of GDP, while IT is only 0.8% of the labor force and produces 8% of GDP. So states first, then cities, then sectors, and then firms. And I'll keep coming back to this because it was what I heard so much in that video about sort of people working on farms and working on small self-employment, which always drives me crazy because there's a 26 times difference between our biggest and smaller firms just in manufacturing. And if you're stuck in this low-level equilibrium, because as an entrepreneur, there are 2 kinds of companies you can create, a baby and a dwarf. Both are small, but the baby is going to grow, the dwarf is going to stay there. And if there's a 24 times difference in productivity, you'll never pay the wage premium. But if you never pay the wage premium, you'll never be productive. So we get stuck in this low-level equilibrium. And then obviously individuals. We pay 7 times different salary to kids who have the same qualification on paper and technically have really the same age and same skills, but we pay 6 to 7 times difference in salary. Now, I know we have a sophisticated algorithm. Some of it may be English, some of it may be body odor, some of it may be cut your nails before you come for the interview. Some may be as basic as polish your shoes and tuck your shirt in. But obviously, we've got sophisticated at kids the same age, same qualification, paying 6 times, 7 times difference in salary. And I think that that is what the education system sort of misconstrues. We're not asking you to give us electricians or plumbers with the technical skills. It would be nice, but we can teach somebody to be a barbender, a mason, or a salesperson in 6 months, but we can't teach them what school should have taught them in 12 years. So these 5 geographies of work need to change. How does change happen? It happens through luck, it happens through skill, it happens through choices, right? I have always wondered where success comes from, but you know, I know luck is a problem, right? I know a lot of lucky people who are completely unskilled. I know skill is a problem. I know lots of skilled people who are unlucky. So I'm sort of going to put my eggs in the basket of choices, right? Dumbledore tells Harry Potter in Chamber of Secrets, it is our choices more than our abilities that reveal what we really are. And it was fascinating, some of the choices that your kids in the video expressed would not have been expressed 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And I think that is the most optimistic part for me of that report, right? I mean, India has a bunch of luck, let's be clear. There are 3 structural pieces of luck for India right now, and there are sort of 3 tactical. The structural pieces are there's a new economic world order. You know, the economic gravity is shifting to Asia. You don't have to be Western to be modern. There's a new world of work. Work from home, which COVID has legitimized, means work from anywhere. So you've actually accelerated. If you're working for a job in New York from Chicago or from rural Indiana, you can do that from anywhere else in the world. There's a new world of education. You know, Google knows everything. Soft skills matter more than hard skills. Soft skills are not taught, they are caught. And so you can think about this structural change, at least I think of it in India's favor. Obviously, your video talked about the digitization super cycle. There is no such thing as a technology company anymore. Every company is a technology company. I think there's some sort of tactical pieces of luck. I think there's a China luck. You know, Xi Jinping has made a list of everything Deng Xiaoping did right, and he's crossing it off. You know, I hope he doesn't get a 3rd term. I hope he gets a life term. That'll be wonderful for India. I think aging is another piece of luck, right? You know, the sale of adult diapers crossed baby diapers in Japan. And last year, for the first time, there are more people alive on the planet who are more than 65 years old, and then compared to people who are less than 5 years old. India obviously is in the sweet spot of this. There's a bunch of skill, you know, as I said, India exported more software than Saudi Arabia did oil in 2021. 90% of our venture capital investment has come in the last 5 years. We got $100 billion of remittances. So there's a bunch of luck, there's a bunch of skill. But to move beyond basics, I'm talking from the exit. I'm not in the education system, but from the exit gate of the education system, which is what you will have to think if you move beyond basics, there are really 5 choices for these 5 geographies of work. An important one is urbanization. I think that, you know, at least I believe you won't be able to take jobs to people, you have to take people to jobs in the short run. You know, I had a kid in Gwalior in a job first telling me, you know, give me 4,000 rupees in Gwalior, 7,000 rupees in Gurgaon, 12,000 rupees in Delhi, and 20,000 rupees in Bombay. I said, why do you need 4 times the money to go to Bombay? He said, जितने बच्चे 10,000 में बॉम्बे गए थे, सब वापस आ गए. खाना, रहना और ऑफिस जाना नहीं बनता है. Living, eating, and commuting. I said, तुम तो 3rd class फेल है, तुमको मैं 20,000 क्यों दूंगा? He says, अरे मैं graduate से खाना कम थोड़ी खाता हूँ सर. So, you know, he had a purchasing power parity model in his head. We hired him on the spot. But he was talking about the divergence between real wages and nominal wages. And that is the problem, right? Because employers care about nominal wages and employees care about real wages. So we have only 52 cities with more than 1 million people. China has 375. We have 6 lakh villages. Only 2 lakh of those villages have less than 200 people. So I'm not talking about shoving more people into Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. I'm talking about 100 cities with more than 1 million people. You know, this 10 million city is an Asian innovation. Out of 32 cities in the world, 27 are in Asia. And it's not really optimal. But I think it's changing a lot. 10%, Chhat is now celebrated in Kerala because 9.5% of Kerala is Bihari. You know, they sent 10% to the Middle East, so they brought 9.5% from Bihar. so essentially, you can't be a civil contractor in Kerala or Tamil Nadu unless you speak Hindi anymore. So I think this urbanization is happening, migration is happening, but 29 chief ministers matter more than one prime minister from a perspective of this labor market and urbanization. I think formalization is another perspective which was captured indirectly in so many of the comments. You know, we have 63 million enterprises in India, 12 million don't have an office, 12 million work from home, only 12 million are registered for GST, only 1 million pay PF and ESI. But there are only 24,500 companies in India with a paid-up capital of more than 10 crores. So why is 6.3 crore enterprises only translating to 25,000? I have made the case for a long time that it's the excessive regulatory cholesterol for employers. There are 1,500 acts which apply to employers. There are 6,700 compliances. There's 6,700 filings. There's 26,410 ways to go to jail for employers. And there are 67,000 compliances. Nobody is asking you to get rid of all these compliances, filings, or jail provisions, but they don't bother big companies. You know, I have 120 guys in regulatory affairs, but so for us, it's a thorn in the flesh. But for small employers, it's a dagger in the heart. And so the formalization which has accelerated comes from lower regulatory cholesterol. I think industrialization, you know, the world pays you more to use your mind than your body. You know, farmers work much harder than I do, but they get made much less. And the only way to help farmers is to have less farmers. China's farm to non-farm transition happened to factories. India's is happening to sales, customer service, and logistics. And that's why it's closely related to your report, because for sales, customers, and logistics report, college isn't as important as it used to be. The school premium, the wage premium is the school premium rather than the skill premium. And so it's important for all of you to think about a very different industrialization, because when everybody thinks of industrialization, either you think of US after World War II, but 80% of the cars in the world were made in the US then, or you think of Southeast Asia in the 80s when they exported their way because they had small domestic markets. Or you think about China, who had a large domestic market but exported its way. You know, India in 2024 doesn't have the same luck that Deng Xiaoping had in 1978, when he got a 30-year supercycle of global growth, deconstruction of manufacturing supply chains, and openness to trade. So I think industrialization is really, really important. Financialization, you understand. We need more equity markets. We need our banks to be fixed. But the important one for you, the fifth geography of work, is really wages versus self-employment. You know, 50%, many of your kids already said that they're working on the farm. You know, there was 50% of India is self-employed is often a number that is bandied around, but that's not self-employment, that is self-exploitation, right? There was this idiot Russian economist in 1924. He convinced Nehru, his name was Chayanov, he convinced Nehru that small farms are viable because you don't have to pay your kids a salary, your wife a salary, and you don't have to pay rent. I don't think India's beyond basic strategy has to really involve self-exploitation. So I think a different way to think about enterprises is really important, or a different way to think about work. I'm not only talking about wage employment, but 50% being self-employed is corroding our education system, it's corroding our productivity, and it has lots of deep implications. So I hesitated to add the fifth geography of work around education, but you know, I'm at the exit gate of the education system. But prepare, repair, and upgrade are becoming existential problems for the world of work. Because we can't prepare our employees, right? There's no financing model. In fact, there's a market failure in skill development. You know, employers are not willing to pay for training, or candidates are willing to pay a premium for trained candidates. Candidates are not willing to pay for a job, they're willing to pay for training. Banks or microfinance aren't willing to lend to a candidate unless the job is guaranteed. And obviously training companies, only 5.7% of your kids are enrolled in vocational courses, so they're unable to fill up their classrooms. But so the 10 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2 system is not only unfit because my parents had 35-year careers and I'll have a 45-year career and my kids will have a 55-year career, but very often what you're thinking of skilled premium in wages is the school premium in wages, at the bottom of the pyramid. I keep coming back to that because I exist in the bottom of the pyramid. And so lifelong learning is no longer something for PhDs. It is really key for salespeople, for logistics, and customer service, which are really the fastest growing jobs. Obviously English, which came up again and again. You know, I remember in Gwalior, I was at a job fair and a kid kept shoving his BA in English certificate in my face. So I kept asking him questions in English and he kept answering me in Hindi. I said, why are you answering me in Hindi? You have a BA in English, you know? I mean, English is like Windows, it's an operating system. Your wage premium is 300% higher. He says, आपको सच बताऊं सर, मैंने अपना BA English हिंदी में किया है. आप जो लिखाना है लिखा लो, मैं बात नहीं करता हूँ English में. So I think that it's and in English anyway in India, I know it sounds sort of patronizing. It's always being about being multilingual, right? I mean, the two most interesting poets of Hindi and Urdu at Allahabad University were Firaq Gorakhpuri and Harivansh Rai Bachchan. Both were professors of English literature. So we have learned this thing a long time ago, that we're not shoving English down anybody's throat. English is a vocational skill, and our language is the one we think in or use fun. But in this world of skills, you know how to fix schools more than I do, though I think that small class sizes, teacher qualifications, and teacher salary are really not as effective as governance and performance management. You need to create a fear of falling and a hope of rising. It's what we haven't done in ITIs, it was we haven't done in employment exchanges. But in skills now we have 5 design principles. Learning while earning, if you want the learning program to be inclusive. Learning by doing, because soft skills are not taught, they are caught. Learning with qualification modularity. You want multiple on-ramps for a 3-month certificate, an opening balance for a 1-year diploma, it's an opening balance for a 2-year advanced diploma, is an opening balance for a degree. And obviously learning with multimodal delivery. The on-campus visualization of UGC for decades as the only way to do college is really different from the other 4 classrooms that we use. We use an online classroom, we have an on-site classroom, we have a mentoring classroom, we use an on-job classroom. So I think there are 5 classrooms that you need to think about. And now that we have all the 5 design principles sort of embedded in NEP, I think you'll start seeing the difference. Parents want 1/3 ITI, 1/3 employment exchange, and 1/3 college. They obviously want the social signaling value of college, but if you give them the wage premium in other ways, they can get their social signaling value of college in many ways. And anyway, the world has produced more graduates in the last 50 years than the 400 years before that, right? But it's still rational. Michael Spence got his Nobel Prize for his work on the social signaling value of college. I went to Wharton. Wharton is my wife went to Harvard. They're good places to be at, but they're better places to be from, right? The fundamental value of going to IIT is being from IIT, not being at IIT. So I would submit that, in closing, the question which ASER has tried to answer for a long time, Jonas Salks, he was the inventor of the polio vaccine. He once said the most important question to ask yourself is, are you being a good ancestor? And the question is, how do you be a good ancestor, right? And I think for India at 100, there are sort of 3 things. Obviously, we need to take more risk. We need a more adventurous state. We need a more adventurous private sector. We need a more adventurous non-profit sector. Ghalib used to say, "Manzil to milegi bhatak ke sahi, gumrah to wo hain jo ghar se nahi nikle," right? And there's so many ways in which we have not sort of left home. But if we don't take more risk, because the low-hanging fruit in everything has been picked. So if you keep defining victory as basics, and it's wonderful to see you define victory now as beyond basics, because Bhuka Nanga Pyasa is not gone, but it is not as big a problem as it used to be. And if we don't start thinking of redefining our element of success, that'll happen. I think more long-term thinking, I grew up in Kashmir. They have 2 words for property, amanat and jagir. Jagir is yours. The Maharaja of Cooch Behar used to spend 50% of the state treasury on Cartier and Rolls Royce. It was his Jagir, idiot. But amanat is not yours. It's really something you hand over in better condition than you got it. And I think human capital is really the only way to do that. And human capital is not just the repair, prepare, upgrade, the industrialization, financialization. The most important human capital was mentioned in your report is about role models. Maya Angelou used to say, the universe isn't made of atoms, it is made of stories. And I see these 2 stories in very different parts of India. My parents retired to live in Kanpur. And whenever I go to Kanpur, there's some kid who comes up to me and says, "Sir, आपको ये MLA और minister से मिलाने ले जाते हैं, वो 25 crore, 50 crore का contract होगा, उसमें से हम लोग 10 crore मार लेंगे." Because his role model is Ponti Chadda or Subroto Rai Sahara or some such goon whose only way to get rich is regulatory arbitrage. I grew up in Bangalore, and we had Kiran Shaw, we had Nandan, we had Azim Premji, who always told us, don't care about how much of your company you own. Make the company big, make it successful. So none of us own large parts of our company in Bangalore. I only own 15% of my company when I started it even 25 years ago. So I may be the founder, but I don't own 50, 75%. So that whole concept of Amanat Jagir, but the role models in India are really changing, and I think that's an important point. So you know, when I landed in the US in 1994, there was a front page article on the Wall Street Journal. It said that India is more interesting than important. I hope that journalist is eating the newspaper on which he wrote that, right? Because what's happening in India is not once in a decade or once in a millennium, it's really once in the lifetime of a country. But over the years, I memorized Pandit Nehru's Tryst with Destiny speech when I was a child, and I felt we missed our tryst with destiny, right, in some sense, because there are 400 million people who will never read the newspaper that they deliver, or sit in the car that they clean, or send their kids to the school that they help build. But this was never a challenge like cancer or climate change, right? This was a plumbing problem. It was a plumbing problem at various levels. And I think we've now understood the plumbing problem, we've made some progress in the plumbing problem, and I think the next 25 years offer a unique sort of opportunity to combine this mass democracy which we have with mass prosperity. And I think that is really our new tryst with destiny, and it's an appointment I think we will keep. Thank you.